It's time to duel. 2017 is here, and at the latest Jump Festa, they announced that a brand new Yu-Gi-Oh series will be premiering in April after the conclusion of Arc 5. I've been a fan of the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise for about 12 years now, but I've never really talked about it on this channel before, so what better time than now? One of the most interesting parts of each series for me is the main rival. They tend to be among my favorite characters from each show. Well, most of the time. So in preparation for the still unnamed 6th series of Yu-Gi-Oh, let's take a look at the main rivals across the 5 series we've gotten so far. A few things before we get started though. First off, I'm only talking about the main rivals, the ones that have been a constant presence since the beginning of their respective series. So Zane, Aster, and Kite, sorry guys. Secondly, even though I've watched Zexal and Arc 5 in their original Japanese versions, I'll be primarily referring to all of the characters by their English dub names for the sake of consistency. And lastly, there are definitely going to be spoilers for each series. So let's start off with the OG, the one that started it all, Seto Kaiba. What I really like about Kaiba is that he's such a contrast to the rest of the main characters in the series. While Yugi was optimistic and Joey was very lively and passionate, Kaiba was more cold and cynical. Still, he had a commanding presence when he entered a room, especially when he switched to his Battle City outfit. And I looked forward to whenever he dueled because he never held back, regardless of who his opponent was. It was the kind of ruthlessness that I liked in a character that's meant to be a foil to the protagonist. And while other rivals have come close to matching it, Kaiba is still the most aggressive when it comes to his playstyle. Also, despite his normally crabby attitude, Kaiba was still a decent brother to Mokuba. Part of his motivation to take over Kaiba Corp was so that he could better provide for him. A lot of people forget that the reason Kaiba went to Duelist Kingdom wasn't to get back at Yugi, but so that he could save Mokuba from Pegasus. Yugi was just a bonus, and he even said that he was just a stepping stone to Pegasus. Mokuba was his #1 priority during that arc and the Virtual World arc, as well as one of the few good things about it. There was one thing about Kaiba that annoyed me though. He was established as a character that was always skeptical, which made sense considering that there were very few people in the world that he could trust. Because of this, whenever something supernatural happened, he would always shrug it off as special effects or some kind of trick. Now, at first this was fine, but it started to get a bit annoying later on. And with each major event that occurred, it only got worse. Seriously dude, how much has to happen to you in order for it to get through your head? You've had your soul taken away from you twice, you witnessed Merrick kill people in your tournament, and that priest is clearly supposed to be you in a past life. Even Joey could understand what was going on. No offense to him, because he's actually my favorite character in that series. Imagine having to deal with Quibble Pants' obnoxious denial for 200 plus episodes instead of 15 minutes. Yeah, that's how bad it is. Thankfully, the more enjoyable parts about Kaiba made up for that annoying skepticism. That, and he's nowhere near as whiny as Quibble. So in spite of the aforementioned gripes I have with his personality, Kaiba set the bar way high for the rivals that came after him. And the first one that didn't even come close to that bar. In GX, we had, Chaz Princeton, or Jun Manjome in the original version. While GX to this day is my second favorite series overall, and there were a lot of things I loved about it, Chaz definitely wasn't one of them. As opposed to the other rivals who have all made strong first impressions in one way or another, Chaz did no such thing. He was basically that one guy that talked a big game in school but was really nothing special in reality. Now, Chaz and Kaiba's first duel against their respective rivals both ended with them losing, but Chaz's duel had a lot less weight to it. Kaiba not only disrespected Solomon, but destroyed his most prized card after beating him in a duel, and Yugi faced off against Kaiba for his grandfather's sake. With Chaz, he was just a pawn in Crowler's scheme to get Jaden expelled. Sure, those are some pretty high stakes on paper, especially since Jaden barely got into Duel Academy in the first place, but the majority of Season 1's first half revolved around Crowler trying to get Jaden kicked out, so those schemes are just a dime a dozen. Chaz also had a bad habit of being a bratty drama queen whenever things didn't go his way. When he left Duel Academy and transferred to North Academy, to me it just felt like an extended temper tantrum, like a kid that whines about running away from home only to come back a half hour later. The few sympathetic moments we do get from him end up being heavily outweighed by the rest of his character, and out of all the rivals in the entire franchise, he's the only one to have never beaten the protagonist in a duel. Not even once.
Kaiba never beat Yugi either, Sketchy. He won by surrender in Duelist Kingdom because he took advantage of Yugi's kindness. And Kaiba is just as bitter about losing to Yugi as Chaz is about Jaden.
A win is still a win, Kevin, and unlike Chaz, Kaiba put time, research, and practice into catching up with Yugi, while Chaz just complained about it and took it out on duelists that were nowhere near Jaden's level. Kaiba was always just one step behind Yugi, while Chaz was just left in the dust, and the very close gap between Kaiba and Yugi made their rivalry more interesting. You can almost tell that GX knew that Chaz wasn't an adequate rival because we had Zane in Season 1 and Aster in Season 2, but they both fell by the wayside later on. Now I will give Chaz credit for one thing. I do like that he changes his attitude towards dueling as the show progresses. He learns how to see value in cards that appear to be weak on their own, but have their own hidden strengths beyond raw attack power. Other than that, he was very lackluster as a rival and as a character in general. Thankfully, once we get to 5Ds, we're introduced to a much better rival, Jack Atlas. 5Ds is unique in that the show begins with the rivalry already established, and we're exposed to its origins gradually in the first few episodes. You wonder why Yusei knows Jack and why he seems so desperate to beat him. Then you find out that Jack stole Yusei's prized card and the duel runner he spent so long trying to build, and pretty much abandoned him in the ghetto. Yeah, screw what Kaiba did, this was just messed up, especially since the two had been friends prior to this. I think it was to 5D's benefit that the main rival didn't lose against the protagonist early on, because that left us with something to build up to, a ladder to climb. The entire first arc led up to Yusei's grudge match against Jack, and the payoff was so satisfying. Up until then, Jack made for a serviceable rival. Not outstanding, but still an improvement over what we got before. But that all changed once he took that first loss. Like Kaiba, he took it really hard, but they both dealt with it in different ways. While Kaiba was ashamed, Jack was humbled. With his title as king taken away from him, he spent a lot of time reevaluating himself and his values. He didn't wallow in his misery. He spent his time connecting with others and rebuilding the relationships that he destroyed. And through it, he became a better person and a stronger duelist. This was a great example of a character using their loss to better themselves instead of moping about it for episode after episode. Looking at you, Don. With characters like Carly and later Yusei helping him build himself back up, Jack regained his confidence, and personally, I think that he, along with Akiza, were the real stars of the Dark Signers arc. Jack's relationship with Yusei grew into a genuine friendship by the end of Season 2, which is kinda bittersweet looking back on it. While they still pushed each other to become better, I did miss seeing the ongoing rival struggle. Thankfully, we do get an amazing duel between them in the series finale, and despite the rivalry simmering down a bit in the later parts of 5Ds, Jack was still a very memorable and very well written character. Going into Zexal, we have Shark, also known as Reginald Castle, or Ryoga Kamishiro in the original version. A lot of elements of Zexal were allusions to the original Yu-Gi-Oh series. Yuma and Astral's relationship was similar to Yugi and Yami's, and the World Duel Carnival's first round was very similar to Battle Cities. In Shark's case, he had a lot of similarities to Joey Wheeler. While I saw Jack as a what-if version of Kaiba, I saw Shark as a what-if version of Joey. What if Joey never became friends with Yugi after being shown kindness? What if he had to fight for his sister all by himself? Because he's had quite a few victories against major characters, you really couldn't tell who was gonna win when Shark faced off against Yuma, and contrary to what his personality would have you believe, he fought for more than just his pride. Shark was a lot more selfless than he let on. A lot of the actions he took in Season 2 onward were for the sake of someone else, whether it was his sister Rio or one of his friends. While Shark eventually became friends with Yuma, it took a bit longer for it to happen than the last series, and once it did, it was more of a mutual respect than a buddy-buddy friendship. What I like about this dynamic more than Jack and Yusei's is that there are still obstacles that Yuma and Shark have to overcome, especially once it's revealed that Shark was a reincarnation of Nash, leader of the Barians, who were the main antagonists of the series' second half. So now he's forced to choose between the allies he had in his old life and the new friends he made as a human. The conflict between the Barian and Astral worlds wasn't as simple as good and evil, and the rivalry between Shark and Yuma became a representation of that. It became more than just the two of them, and it makes Shark my favorite rival to date. Zexal tends to get more of a bad rap than any of the other series because of the comparatively light tone it had at the very beginning, but I honestly think that it got way more flack than it deserved. The series really picked up in season 2 and started to get really dark once the Baryons were introduced, and when they did, the body count went way up. Seriously, the amount of deaths in this series almost ties with the original series. Hell, it might even surpass it if you didn't count the deaths that only happened in the manga. Last but not least, we have the main rival of Arc 5, Declan Akaba, or Reiji Akaba. Now there isn't much for me to say about Declan for several reasons. Firstly, Arc 5 is still ongoing as of this video, so his role in the story hasn't concluded yet. Secondly, I have quite a bit of catching up to do, so there are most likely some future developments about him that I have yet to learn. And lastly, compared to the other rivals, he hasn't really done much. Arc 5 is almost over, yet the number of on-screen duels Declan has had pales in comparison to his fellow rivals, and he spends a majority of the series operating behind the scenes and shrouded in mystery. So because we have neither a complete story nor any substantial things to say about Declan, he's up in the air at this point. Hopefully it does amount to something, since Arc 5 is my favorite series out of all of them right now, and I really wouldn't want the conclusion to mess that up. Now, if I had to list all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rivals from best to worst, I'd have Shark at the top, then Jack at a very close second, followed by Kaiba, then Chaz at the very bottom. I'm omitting Declan since Arc 5 hasn't ended yet and what we do have about him isn't much. It was definitely fun going over all the rivals in the franchise, and if this video does well, maybe I'll do one covering the female leads and eventually one covering the main protagonists. For now, I'm glad that I decided to go with the rivals first. They served as very pivotal characters in their respective series and helped keep them exciting and interesting. Except you, Chaz, you're just garbage. So what do you think of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Rivals? Swarm that comment section below or bug me on social media, and consider supporting me through Patreon or PayPal art commissions. Until next time, keep it sketchy, folks.